It's Halloween! I wonder if the spooky ghost left me any presents. Castlevania 64, I wanted 1080 snowboarding. Hey friends, I'm Pragmatik and I like to talk about video games. And today I want to talk about Castlevania 64. And honestly, I don't remember a whole lot about this game, so I want to see if it was as enjoyable as I think it was back in the day. So let's get into it. The PS1, Dreamcast, and N64 would launch a new age of 3D games. With Castlevania being as popular as it is, Konami felt it was time for the journey into 3D as well. Their first attempt at this would be Castlevania 64. Lots of new ideas would be implemented into this iteration, but there would certainly be a lot of throwbacks as well. This time around, you'd have two characters to play as. You can play as either heir to the Belmont clan Reinhard Schneider, or Carrie Fernandez. Reinhardt carries the vampire killer and is, in my opinion, a little harder to use, while Carrie uses magic and makes the game kind of easy. I usually go with Carrie as her magic can be charged and released as sort of a homing attack. There is a callback to the classic Castlevania already, as both characters come from bloodlines from old Castlevania games. If you know your Castlevania lore, you can probably figure out who these ancestors might be. Like most Castlevania games, you don't immediately start out in Dracula's domain. Instead, you'll be making your way towards the resurrected castle. This starter stage is a pretty good way to show you just what you're getting into. It's a good introduction to the platforming, camera angles, and general atmosphere of the game. Unfortunately, this also means you'll be subjected to the game's major problems. Look, I didn't say it was a great game. As was a major problem for many games coming into 3D platforming, camera angles are the bane of this game's existence. Despite having different camera modes such as normal view, battle view, and action view, this does not help you at all, as mostly you'll be fighting with the camera itself to see what you're doing when it comes to platforming. Luckily, hitting the R bumper will try to reset the camera behind you. Platforming in general is another issue you'll be facing, especially in the beginning. As if to oppose the format of old Castlevania games, jumping feels kind of loose and will have you sliding all over the place. It's certainly not a good feel when the opening stage has multiple areas with minimal margin for error in its platforming. But to be honest, it seems to get better from here. Still, one of my favorite things about the original Castlevania games were how tight the jumps were. You had to be completely devoted to the jump you were making. This game has you praying that you'll even make it to the other side. At least the characters suction cup themselves to the ledges if they're close enough. Actual fighting is pretty fleshed out too. Just like the old games, you have a plethora of items to use against foes. Carrie has her magic that can be powered up to be really effective, but there are a lot of weapons you can pick up, and they are all items you're used to. The axe, knife, holy water, and cross all make a return to this game, and you'll probably just stick to the one you like. I usually prefer the cross as it has a precise arc and can come back to you. Items can be replenished with these red gems you find. You also have a melee attack with Carrie that doesn't do a lot of damage but does help to create some breathing room. You can also do the slide thing. Hey! This variety of fighting will be good because there's a multitude of enemies to block your path. And unlike last year, there are actually skeletons in this game! The skeletons in this game are by far my favorite enemy. As spooky as they try to be, they really just come off looking very silly as they just kind of slide around and try to punch you. There are even some skeletons that just try to catch you and explode. But you'll also be faced with vampires, Cerberus, glass soldiers, and all kinds of creatures. But there will always be these silly skeletons. These guys are a mockery to your culture. Another throwback you'll find is the day and night system first established in Castlevania Simon's Quest. But instead of nightfall bringing out a curse, this mechanic is used to open doors that can only be opened at certain times of day. It being day or night can strengthen or weaken certain foes, but that's not really the central focus. You can advance to day or night using the sun and moon cards you find throughout the game, but it would be better to use these sparingly, as failing to reach the castle keep in 10 in-game days will cause you to get the bad ending. And let's talk about the castle for a bit. Seeing Castlevania in this new 3D spectrum is just a treat for the eyes. I really think that getting to the castle is when the game gets really fun. It's not just staircase after staircase, rather you'll be traveling through the villa, the gardens, and even the keep itself, which makes for a pleasant variety of scenery.
Come, meet your doom.
We talked about the old, so let's talk about the new. The transition to 3D allowed Castlevania 64 to take a more cinematic approach. Entering certain areas will cause certain events to happen that really give the game a more suspenseful feel. I actually really like this because it gives you a nice break from all the stressful camera angles and platforming. The game also breaks away from the standard level to level you might be used to. This time around you'll find yourself having to complete certain events, like trying to find the keys throughout the villa, or having nitroglycerin on your person and not being able to run or jump. Then there's the most notorious part of the game where you meet this mysterious boy, only to have a chainsaw-armed madman appear and you make your way out of this garden maze. This was the part of the game that I never forgot about as a kid, and it genuinely terrified me. I remember getting through it and just never going back to that part of the map again. Having cinematics play out also brings out a few key characters, like the aforementioned mysterious boy that I really can't talk about without going into major parts of the story, Rosa, the vampire that doesn't want much to do with you, Charlie Vincent, a vampire that isn't all that great at hunting vampires, and lastly Renan, a demon who can sell the player certain items to help throughout their journey. This actually serves to make money you collect useful instead of making it a scoring system like the past iterations. There's also a bit of replayability to this game. Each character takes a few routes exclusive to them, like Carrie takes the waterway system. And we don't talk about the waterway system. They also encounter some foes that are unique to them, which also expands their character backstory and development. As far as the story goes, you could probably guess how it plays out. The reappearance of the castle means only one thing: the resurrection of Dracula. Your journey to the castle is solely to stop his reign of terror, though this time around there is a pretty interesting plot twist. The characters you meet along the way help to flesh out the journey to the final destination, which is a nice touch from going to one stage to the next. Like I said before, there is a refreshing portion of scenery in this game. Going to the castle gates, to the villa, to the towers and keep really help to expand the idea of just how big the castle actually is. A new aspect unique to this iteration of Castlevania is status ailments. Along with the constant threat of being attacked from every direction is the addition of status ailments. Some enemies can poison and even cause vampirism. This is a good little addition to the difficulty, as a lot of the game's difficulty is rather artificial. The difficulty of the game comes more from the mechanics themselves rather than what the game tries to create for you. The camera angles will be the biggest foe you face, and while I do believe the worst is over when getting into the castle, the angles will still cause everything else to be that much more difficult. You really have to feel the controls for yourself to understand just how this game somehow combines a sluggish jump with a really slippery landing. You'll find yourself less concerned about your health and more about the multiple insta-death pitfalls. This isn't something that feels like skill, it feels like luck. Another oddity is it's sometimes hard to tell just what's a boss. Sometimes you'll enter a fight with a slightly different enemy and it gives you the notion that you're fighting a boss. Like this Guardian Bone Snake is a boss, but a similar theme is playing for this random cutscene vampire. Kinda just has you wondering, is this a boss? Is that a boss? I don't think that was a boss. Oh, there it is. As for the music in this game, it's pretty hit or miss, a little surprising given it's a Castlevania game. There are a few original pieces that I can get lost in, and I do still hold the intro's violin version of Bloodlines to be one of the best versions. There's also a nicely done version of Dance of Illusions as well. Castlevania 64 was Konami's first attempt at a true 3D Castlevania experience, and while it makes for a pleasant, albeit frustrating adventure, it does really show that this was a first attempt. Saying that, I believe that Konami knew the game needed more work, and sought out to do just that. Castlevania Legacy of Darkness was kind of an expansion to Castlevania 64, even using the N64 expansion pack to improve the visuals. This game corrected movement and camera angles, just all the things that made 64 a little rough. And if you want an in-depth review of that game, well, no better person to do that for you than Nefarious Wes. I'll leave a card here to check it out if you're interested. Konami set out to give Castlevania the 3D experience, and for what it's worth, they succeeded. And their attempt to fix what was damaged with their first game shows that they really wanted to establish a format. This game is, as best as I can describe, a good start. Plus it's got skeletons, man. Skeletons. While Castlevania 64 was the first 3D game in the series, there was another in development for an entirely different console before it was scrapped. And if you want to learn more about it, then I highly recommend checking out Mike Tendo's video about the cancelled game for the Dreamcast. I know I plugged two people in this video, but these two guys are some of the biggest Castlevania fans I know, so go check them out! Hey guys, thanks for checking out this year's Halloween special. Hope you have a great one, and if you'd like to see more from me, like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me how much Legacy of Darkness was better. Check out last year's Halloween video if you haven't seen it. Until next time, be safe, and keep it spooktacular.